Welcome to another episode of Washington in Focus Daily. I'm Carleen Johnson, state government reporter for the Center Square, Washington. And it is day 46 of our 60-day legislative session, a beautiful sunny Thursday here in Olympia. And the day started very interesting. There's plenty of talk about a member of majority leadership who was apparently quite intoxicated during a Wednesday late day hearing. So we're going to dive into that kind of public embarrassment and reaction to that in today's episode. Then there was an early morning hearing on Senate Bill 6347. This is the proposition to reverse the 2025 increase in the state estate tax, the death tax, if you will, which was increased to a top rate of 35%. Some suggest the decision to roll it back, which is coming from Democrats, is an admission that some of their tax the rich policies maybe have failed, or that maybe others are suggesting it's potentially a big payoff for business, larger businesses and some of the big tech folks, to kind of get them to stay quiet as they pass the income tax. So we're going to have some of what the sponsor for this bill said at that hearing I attended this morning, and some reaction as well, or one of the questions that was posed by a Republican member on that committee this morning. And then to a bill that hasn't really received a lot of attention, except some of our coverage and then some of our friends east of the mountains, but a bill to repeal the luxury aircraft tax. That bill was dead early this month. This prime sponsor told me that, but it's apparently been resurrected as what they call a trailer to the transportation package. May not sound like a big deal, but the sponsor of the repeal bill, Representative Tom Dent, tells me this is a huge victory for any aviation business in our state, and not just for the rich who might rely on private aircraft to get around the state, but for firefighting and for emergency medical aircraft. So more on that coming up in today's episode of Washington in Focus Daily. So thing one today was a very public embarrassment for House Majority Leader Joe Fitzgibbon of West Seattle, who admits via email sent to the Center Square and to our program for Washington in Focus Daily that he was, in fact, intoxicated during a House Appropriations Committee meeting on Wednesday evening. This hearing started at 4 o'clock on Wednesday. It was an executive session on House Bill 2289, and that's basically the supplemental operating budget. We've been talking about that in episodes earlier this week about another $2 billion that majority Democrats want to add on to the budget. So it was just over 2 hours into the debate on Wednesday when Representative Fitzgibbon was offering some final remarks on the proposed budget. And he did appear glassy-eyed. His speech was slurred as he urged support for the legislation. He was not wearing a suit jacket. I've never seen him in any hearing or media veil or anywhere on campus really without a suit jacket over his shirt. His hair looked a little disheveled. So anyway, here's part of his speech during that House Appropriations Committee meeting Wednesday evening.
I think it really matters that we're hearing from members of both caucuses, both Democrats and Republicans, about what the people that they represent need. We also have, I think, through this budget shown that in spite of those incredible challenges, in spite of those incredible expenses that Washington state taxpayers are now being asked to bear, we have still managed to put forward a budget that prioritizes the people of our state. I am grateful to all the members of this committee and all the members of the House for putting forward their ideas and making sure that the operating budget that we've put forward does not forget that the people that we are working to represent the people that we are working to lift up and support, don't always have a voice in this process, and that their voice is carried forward by the members of this body. Every public employee in this state can rely on retirement security guaranteed by the state of Washington, both because of the decisions of courts in years past, but also because of the decisions of the legislature to make sure that those pension plans are fully funded and that are the envy of every state in the country.
So on Thursday morning, after watching that speech, I had not watched it live on Wednesday. It was brought to my attention by another member, but after I watched it, it seemed pretty obvious that something was going on. So we reached out to Fitzgibbon's office via email and received a response that read in part, "I made a poor choice last night by drinking alcohol before we had finished our work for the day. I'm disappointed in myself." Basically said, it will not happen again. So GOP lawmakers on that same committee, House Appropriations, told the Center Square it was obvious that the majority leader was intoxicated, and some were using the word obviously drunk. One member of the committee who didn't want to give his name publicly told me the chair of that committee had called a recess earlier in the hearing, and they told him, we got to deal with Fitzgibbon, basically. And then they resumed. At some point, he came wandering back in. The majority leader did it and took his position there. And then it was, near the end, right before they were concluding that hearing, an executive session, that he asked to speak and was given that opportunity. Representative Michelle Valdez, formerly Caldier from Gig Harbor, did speak with me on the record today. She is on that committee and is not running for re-election, so perhaps that's why she felt a little more free to comment on what she witnessed. And here's part of what Representative Valdez said.
All the Republicans had suspected, based off of how his behavior was, and when he spoke, his words were very slurred. The sad part is that you have to understand that he is responsible. He is the House Majority Leader. He is responsible for our state and for the Washington State Democrats and also for our state budget. And I'm sorry, but he has so much power, and it is so disenfranchising to know that he's drunk on the job. And you also have to remember that, a couple years ago, Tim Ormsby, who writes the budget for our state, he was drinking while he was writing the budget and took out somebody's front porch. And the thing is that, to be honest, if I was in charge of the Democrats and if I was in charge of our state budget and destroying the state the way that I was, I'd probably drink too. But at the same time, if they actually listened to Republicans and allowed us into the room to solve some of the problems in our state, maybe they wouldn't have to do that.
It's worth noting that the committee chair, Tim Ormsby, could have made the decision not to allow Fitzgibbon to speak in the hearing. Now, at that point, they all knew he was intoxicated, but he let him speak, perhaps because Representative Fitzgibbon is the majority leader, and out of deference to his leadership, he wasn't going to say, no, you can't speak. But Ormsby himself, the chair, had his own very public embarrassment with a DUI crash in 2018. That involved a pretty serious rollover crash. He was arrested for drunk driving. At the time, he came out and said, I made a really bad choice, succumbed to the pressures of this place. I should have had my constituents at the forefront of my mind when I was working on that budget. And I'm told by other members that, he's sober now. So it's kind of interesting that he made the decision to go ahead and allow Representative Fitzgibbon to make that speech. A couple of other members spoke to me off the record. They didn't want to comment. And a couple of them conceded, there's members that sometimes on both sides of the aisle that have been known to occasionally drink on campus. Not sure if that means during session business hours or not, but Representative Fitzgibbon has apologized. And we will see what happens from here on out. Okay, now to the estate tax rollback. This is Washington Senate Bill 6347 proposes to reverse the 2025 increase in the state's estate tax, which put the top rate up to 35%. So somebody dies, they're a multimillionaire, say they've got a $9 million mansion, you're going to give 35%, and your family takes over, right? Maybe wants to sell that property. Well, 35% of the profits of that would go back to the state. Apparently there's been some pushback, even though this thing is not yet even in effect. But this bill, Senate Bill 6347, would roll it back to the rate that it was prior to passage last year, making that top rate 35%. Apparently aims to address the concerns raised by some wealthy individuals, the high tax burden on the wealthy in the state of Washington. People have talked about capital flight and relocating. The bill's sponsor is Senator Claudia Kaufman of Kent. So in the hearing, which I sat in this morning, which started at 8 a.m., she said, really it just aims to undo recent changes that made Washington's estate tax rate the highest in the nation. So here's Senator Kaufman, and then an interesting question to her posed by committee member Representative Cindy Jacobson of Puyallup.
This is a very straightforward adjustment to our estate tax. Last year, the rate within our schedule was increased, and this bill simply restores it back to those rates that were there. The state tax, of course, will continue to support education through the Education Legacy Trust.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Could you let us know why you're running this in a time when we have such a budget crisis?
We have such a budget crisis. Yes, we do have such a budget crisis. There are a lot of things I could say about the budget crisis, but in terms of this particular bill, this was a rate increase that was the largest. It took a significant jump, and I believe it impacted the people who live here, and people would consider moving in order to save those estate taxes.
Now, supporters of revisiting the policy, cite some reports that high net individuals, they're considering relocating to states with lower taxes. Now, state officials have conceded they don't know the impact yet because, it's not until people file their taxes for this year, which people are doing now, but April is when they expected to be able to, produce the first results and say how many people paid the higher estate tax rate, how much did it bring in for the state of Washington. But if this thing gets rolled back, it's going to go back to where it was before. Others have suggested that this is, as I mentioned, just being rolled back to basically concede, all these tax the rich policies, or some of them may not be a good idea. We better at least roll this one back since we're asking for a millionaire's income tax as well. And that one's still steaming toward approval here in Olympia. So we're going to be watching that very well. And I should tell you, the bill is set for executive session. The estate tax rollback set for executive session in the House Committee on Finance at 8 a.m. on Monday. All right. Now to House Bill 2347. This is a bill that would have repealed the tax on luxury aircraft. The sponsor is Representative Tom Dent, Republican of Moses Lake. And early this month, I spoke with him, and he was pretty bummed out. He said the bill's dead. The bill's dead, even though we thought he had, a commitment from some majority Democrats to repeal this thing this year. But it apparently has new life because it's been rolled into the yet-to-be-passed transportation package. So have to back up to last session. It was Senate Bill 5801, which at the time was sponsored by Senator Marco Lias, Democrat from Edmonds, and he got his bill passed to tack on a 10% sales and use tax on the sale or lease of non-commercial aircraft valued over $500,000. So the tax has not yet taken effect, set to April of this year. But Representative Dent, who's himself an aviator and a rancher in Moses Lake, he was hearing just after that bill passed last year major concerns about the potential negative impacts on aviation businesses here in Washington state. In fact, the Aircraft Owners and Pilots Association said the bill threatened aircraft component manufacturers as well by adding to the overall tax burden. And part of the issue, they said, is it really encouraged aircraft registrations in more tax-friendly neighboring jurisdictions like Oregon and in Idaho. And in fact, that has already happened. As I wrote about earlier this month, a business called Schweitzer Engineering out of Pullman, they've already relocated some of their aircraft to Idaho to avoid the tax. They've got 5 corporate aircraft, 8,000 employees, and they use the airplanes to move their employees all around the state. And it's a worldwide company that does business everywhere. So relocating those aircraft out of state certainly has the potential to cost the state of Washington significant tax revenue. But again, Dent's bill has apparently been rolled in as what they call a trailer to the transportation package. And I spoke with Representative Dent about that this morning. He explained most people think luxury aircraft is private jets for the super rich, but he said it's not that part of the industry that would really be hurt by this tax.
Aircraft are tools. They're not. I mean, there's some folks in the legislature who have always referred to them as big boys' toys, but, aircraft are tools. I mean, not saying that there's not an occasional toy out there. Don't misunderstand me. Corporations, businesses use them for executive transportation, personnel transportation, things of this nature. They're also used in agriculture for spraying, for aerial photography, infrared photography to check the health of fields, et cetera, et cetera. Firefighting, of course. So our aerial assets in firefighting are huge. They're just huge, what we've been able to accomplish and how we've been able to knock the fires back. So they use them a lot in law enforcement, surveillance, and healthcare. The aircraft the air ambulances that fly people around, the helicopters that come to the hospital and pick you up after you've had a heart attack and take you to some place where they can save your life, right? But they go out on the freeway where there's been a bad wreck and they land and they pick you up and they get you to to an emergency center. So, all these things are these kind of aircraft that cost us a huge amount of money. Okay, the toys that we have, the aircraft that I have, for myself, doesn't fit into that. I would never had to pay that tax, okay, because it isn't worth that much, okay. But the aircraft that they fit into that, pretty for the most part, are not toys. Okay, they're not toys; they are tools.
So again, Representative Dent obviously very pleased that his bill has been resurrected. He's got fingers crossed for the full repeal of the tax. So that's it for day 46. Here in Olympia, we've got just 14 days left in the regular session. We are set to wrap up 2 weeks from today on March the 12th. So we'll see if they get out of here and gavel out on time. Everybody's suggesting that it doesn't look like we'd have to go into extra session or add any extra time, as long as they can agree, of course, on those final budget proposals that they're all hammering out now. Tomorrow morning, Friday morning, we're going to be back here again bright and early for executive session on the income tax bill. So we'll bring you updates on that bill as it moves through House Finance early on Friday morning. So thank you so much for watching another episode of Washington in Focus Daily. Have a great day. I'm Carleen Johnson.